In the Chalking Points video on the etymology of the word bear, the source of this word is claimed to be the word for brown in the language Proto-Germanic, which we can think of as the mother of English, German, Dutch, Norwegian, Swedish, and various other languages. The prefix proto on the name of a language means primeval, early, or first cut version. Proto-Germanic, in turn, has its roots in a much earlier language, known as Proto-Indo-European. There are no current speakers of either Proto-Germanic or Proto-Indo-European, and there's no written record either. So how is it that we know these languages existed, and that they're related in the way that they are? We know because much of the vocabulary and grammar can be reconstructed from what we know about languages that are currently spoken, as well as extinct languages for which we have records of their existence. Most importantly, examples of their writing systems that have been recovered from archaeological digs. By way of example, we know a lot about one of the earliest reconstructed daughters of Proto-Indo-European, known as Proto Anatolian, because of what can be deciphered from clay tablets that have been found in what is now the country of Turkey, which was part of the Hittite Empire in the 2nd millennium BCE. The writing on these tablets represented the Anatolian language known as Hittite, possibly the earliest Proto-Indo-European language for which we have any evidence. This language has been extinct since being eclipsed by its sister language Luwian around 1300 BCE. Like all the Anatolian languages, Luwian is also now extinct, as it was eclipsed by other languages that came to dominate in that region of the world, including the ancestors of modern Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. Reconstruction is made possible by analyzing the evidence from languages whose structure is known, in some way, in the light of what we know about the general processes of language change, which is to say that we know that languages are constantly changing, and there are some kinds of change that are more natural and more likely than others, even though which exact changes languages opt for is ultimately unpredictable, and the range of possibilities is quite large, as evidenced by the fact that we can see different, seemingly random changes in progress in the vowel pronunciations of Clevelanders and Californians today. And we also know that the changes in pronunciation and vocabulary that are likely to bunch up over time for groups of speakers that are isolated by geographical or social boundaries are likely to produce varieties of the original language that become mutually unintelligible. It is usually in this way that what we can think of as new languages are born. In other words, when dialects become different enough, we consider them to be different languages, but they're still related to each other in the way that sisters in a family are. For this reason, we often talk about languages as having mothers, sisters, and ancestors, and we represent the relationships between them in family tree structures. Consider now how the Proto-Germanic language can be reconstructed, using the example of the word for the concept brown from the Chalking Points video on the bear. As we can see from the Oxford English Dictionary, there are words for this concept in various related modern languages, including English, German, Dutch, Swedish, and Norwegian. Because these words share the same meaning or related meanings and have similar sound structures, which is to say that they begin with the B phoneme, followed by the R phoneme, and end with the N phoneme. And we know independently that these languages descended from dialects of the same mother tongue. We say that these words are cognates. When we have lots of word sets like this with systematic correspondences in sound structure, as we do with the languages in question, and we can attribute any divergences in pronunciation and meaning to the general kinds of language change that we observe in many languages, we can conclude with considerable confidence that the languages are related. And then by reversing the changes that must have occurred, we can reconstruct the mother language from which they descended. In the case of the word for the concept brown, based on this evidence, we would reconstruct a word for Proto-Germanic with B, R, and N for sure. Since the evidence from the Oxford English Dictionary is presented in terms of ordinary spellings, we would need to make conversions to the IPA in some cases. For English, for example, we need to recognize that the OW spelling currently indicates the diphthong ow. But in any case, we notice that there's either a high back-rounded vowel or the glide version of this sound incorporated into a diphthong in all of the current languages in some way. And then we should also take into account our knowledge of the fact that the ow diphthong in modern English is a reflex of a long oo vowel in Old English. And we also know that Old Norse, the mother of Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, and Icelandic, also had a long oo sound in this word. Based on such considerations, we reconstruct B, R, long oo, and N for the word for brown in Proto-Germanic. We can then take things a step further since we know that the mother of Latin, Proto-Italic, and the mother of Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-Aryan, are related languages because of systematic meaning and sound correspondences for a large set of vocabulary items or cognates. And then we see that some kind of B, R, and oo sounds are the constants across languages and across a considerable time span. And we reconstruct the Proto-Indo-European word for brown as BH, R, oo, being a bound root to which various suffixes can be added. The initial consonant sound is written here as a combination of the B and H letters in sequence, but could also be represented with a superscript H after the B. This is a rare kind of B sound with breathy voice caused by a certain kind of spreading of the vocal cords. It is precisely because this kind of sound shares the acoustic properties of a voiceless H, or aspirated voiceless P sound, as well as those of a voiced B sound, that it ends up as B in some of the daughter languages and a voiceless stop or fricative sound with some kind of lip involvement in others. As is typically the case in language change, at least some features of the original sound are preserved over a long period of time. Interestingly, this word also yields the word for the animal beaver in English and various other languages. What happened was that the first sound was reduplicated and the A vowel sound was inserted in order to create an additional syllable that would highlight the reduplication as well as the new meaning. Through the compounding of various natural sound changes, the word ends up as beaver in modern English. What is preserved from Proto-Indo-European in modern English for this word in terms of pronunciation is the voicing in place of articulation of the initial B consonant, the R sound of the second syllable, the labial or lip part of the second consonant sound, and the frontness of the vowel sound. In terms of meaning, although the original notion of brown is lost at some point, the concept of beaver endures for 6 centuries, as it is passed on to Proto-Germanic and from there to Old English, Middle English, and at least most varieties of contemporary English around the world.